Welcome, everyone, to our weekly Torah learning of spreading more light into the world. We always like to start off with giving because how we give, that's how Hashem will give to us. Let's give generously so Hashem can and will give us generously. I'm going to put some coins in the tzedakah box. Please join me from home. And tzedakah is protection. So before you leave your houses, please put tzedakah in as well. We're going to start off with Psalm 20, which is Kapitel Chaf. We're saying this for the hostages to come home immediately. In a miraculous way. And we're saying it for all the chayalim and chayalot that's protecting us, and for Mashiach to come immediately, because then all our problems will be wiped away. And we're including everyone in this Tehillim. And the Tzemach Tzedek said if we only knew the power of Tehillim, you would say it day and night. Lam natseach mizmar leDavid yancha Adonai b'yam tzara. Yisagevcha Shem Eloheya kai v'shlach ezracha mikaydesh. Umitzian yisadecha yiskar kol min chaysecha v'ylaski yidash nasela. Yitain lacha chilva v'afcha v'chalatzcha yimale. Neranana b'shuasecha v'shem Eloheinu nidgo yimale Adonai kol mishal yisecha. Ata yadaiti ki Ashi Adonai mishecha yanei mishmei kashay b'gvori seisha yiminai. Ela v'recha v'ela v'susim v'anachnu b'shem Adonai Eloheinu naskir. Hema karu v'nafalu v'anachnu kamnu v'nisaydad. Adonai Ashia melech yaninu v'yankarenu. We're going to say some names for Refuah Shalema, and we're including everyone. Refuah Shalema for Chana Yenter of Gabashendo, Chana Bela Bas Deborah, Yosef ben Deborah Leah, Yosef Yitzchak ben Bela, Rezel Bas Adas, Rafal Chaimir ben Sima Chasha, Yosef Shlomo ben Risha, Deborah Leah Bas Yafaliba, and Esther Bela Bas Yehudas Chana, and Mercedes ben Esther, and we're including everyone in this Tehillim while we're saying it. Now, we're dedicating this class in memory of my dear grandmother, Rivka Dina Bas Yosef Yehuda, for Chaim Dover ben Betzalel. Chaim Dov ben Betzalel. To save a life is saving a world, and he saved many in the Soviet Union. He was known as Chaim Ber Wolshansky, and for Bela Bas Betzalel, my dear grandmother, who passed away this year, and it's very soon going to be her first year Yartzeit. We're also dedicating this class to a very special person. I'm going to share with you her name, who passed away in a terrible fire a few weeks ago. So we're starting to dedicate this class weekly in honor of Sanya Zahara Bas David. May her neshama, holy neshama, have the highest aliyah. She passed away in a terrible fire in the Upper East Side. She had her shleishim on Teves, and may her family be comforted, and may Mashiach come immediately. We're also dedicating this class for everyone who needs whatever they need. I'm really excited tonight to have a great speaker, but before we do, we're going to start off with a beautiful film to explain tonight's class. So we're going to pull up the video. Give us a moment while we pull it up.
Thus said the Lord God, the great eagle with the great wings and the long pinions, with the full plumage and the brilliant colors. There are many Jewish sages, but only one is called the great eagle. From within a rabbinic culture of sprawling analysis and discussion, one scholar soars to a different vantage point, taking a bird's-eye view. He is the first to codify and organize Jewish law, making it clear and accessible to the masses.
Wie schreibt in der Hadome Kakoten Kagordo, sei bei kleinen Menschen in Ruchnis, sei bei gora größeren Menschen in Ruchnis.
With the Great Eagle's Mishnah Torah, every Jew can master the laws of the entire Torah.
Rambam schreibt sich in der Hakdome Sifrei, was handelt sich sein Hilule von dem Rambams. Hat das bedugma, hat Schas mir lernt Chamisha Chumshe Teiro, und danach geht man nach River und wir lernen beim Sefer Rambam, das Mishne Teiro, von den Unionen, was das Kilo sich Kola Teiro Kulok, alle Halochis, was in der ganz Sefer, was in ganz Teiro. Sei Terische Biksav und sei Terische Balpeh.
In May of 1984, the Lubavitcher Rebbe launched a campaign of daily study of Rambam for every man, woman, and child.
Achrein hat nicht mehr Achet gewinnt, mehr Erzieher gewinnt, als mehr Achet sein. Kol Israel, in demselben Linien, wie das ist in Teiro, was in welchen Linien gleichen sich ist, Kol Israel, von Roshechem Shiftechem, bis heute Vitzecha Veshem Memecho, ist das nicht in Havone was Soge, wo da ist der Achille Godel und Achille Kikri, zwischen Roshechem, bis dem Regelsche bekäme, bis heute Vitzecha Veshem Memecho, der Tapchen, der Kajese Base, was in der Kavone und der Havone was Soge, Teime HaMitzvahs, es kann sein Achille, Kmina Kotze, Ella Kotze, ma schenken bei der Gehe zu Scheme Haloches, der Inne von dem Psag dien bei der Gehe P. Wo das ist gewähnt, der hat so, aber soll sich mit Sache sein, Dafke in dem Limut von Sefer Haloches, wo das ist der Sefer Hayat von dem Rambam.
Rabbi Moshe ben Maimon, the Rambam, was born in Cordoba, Spain in the early 12th century. In his youth, the fanatical Muslim Almohads came to power. To avoid forced conversion or persecution, his family was forced to flee. He writes, "I worked on this commentary under the most arduous conditions, as we were driven from place to place while traveling by land or crossing the stormy sea." With no access to his libraries, the Rambam began writing, relying solely on his memory of the primary sources. After settling in Cairo, he composed a work like none that had come before. He created the first encyclopedia of Jewish law, organizing each of the 613 mitzvot in a way that would allow any Jew to access the entire Torah. On his tombstone it is written, "From Moshe to Moshe, there was no one like Moshe," referring to Moshe Rabbeinu, who led the Jews out of Egypt, and to the scholar Moshe ben Maimon. Today, at the Siyum HaRambam, we celebrate the completion of the 33rd worldwide study cycle of the Mishnah Torah. For more than 3 decades, Jews around the world, men, women, and children, scholars and laymen alike, have been united through this Torah study, united in mind, in heart, and in shared accomplishment. Let's celebrate by reaching out and inviting more Jews to participate in the study of Rambam. You can study alone, with friends or family, at a local class, or online at Chabad.org. We look forward to an even larger gathering next year in Yerushalayim, carried there together on the wings of an eagle.
Wow, thank you for sharing that. So now I'm going to introduce you our incredible speaker. Mrs. Ella Lerman is from Crown Heights, and she's a Jewish history teacher in Beis Rivka High School, and she's a curriculum director of Beis Rivka High School, and she is a brilliant scholar and a huge role model to many. Our topic tonight is the life of and legacy of Maimonides, which is the Rambam, and in honor of the Yartzeit of the Rambam's 20th Yartzeit, which is the 20th of Teves. May his memory be a blessing when we be reunited with the coming of Mashiach very soon. So without further ado, welcome Mrs. Ella Lerman. Honored to have you. And I need to thank Mrs. Sternberg for recommending you. She recommended you to share about the Rambam. So thank you to Mrs. Sternberg and to Shane D. So I'm just going to ask you to unmute. Give me 1 second.
Hi, everybody. Let's see if I can get this right. Okay, hi, everyone. My name is Ella Lerman. I live here in Crown Heights, and I'm going to be talking about the Rambam, and we have a lot to do, so I'm going to go straight into it. I don't know if you take notes or you don't take notes, but if you'd like to remember it so that you can tell it over to your family on Monday, which will be Chaf Teves, the Rambam's Yartzeit. So you feel free to write notes. I think you'll be happy later if you can look it over and, share with other people what you've learned. Okay, so the Rambam is born in 1135 in Cordova, Spain. Cordova, Spain is southern Spain. There were different kingdoms. Spain was divided into many kingdoms, and Cordova's in the kingdom of Andalusia, one of the southern kingdoms in Spain. They were under Muslim rule, and the period of time that the Rambam lives in is the end of what's called the Tkufat HaZahav. The Tkufat HaZahav means a golden age for Jews living in Spain. So in around the 900s, we also call this era the era of the Tkufa of the Rishonim. So in the early 900s, Spain was many Jews from Bavel and Eretz Yisrael were coming to Spain because they heard that the Muslims are there. The Muslims took over Spain in the year 711, but it took some time. During that time for the Jewish community to develop. During that time, the center for Jews in the 700s, the 800s, and even in the early 900s was Bavel. That era is called the Tkufa of the Gaonim. And towards the end of the 900s, many Jews were leaving Bavel for many different reasons. I don't want to get into it now. And they were coming over to North Africa and to Spain. And soon, within 50, 60 years, the community of Spain is sort of going to surpass the communities in Bavel. So the end of the Gaonim is around the year 1000. And earlier than that, in the 900s, the era of the Rishonim was starting. So I hope I haven't confused you. Let me tell you that the Tkufas HaZahav, the 900s, the 1000, and even I would say halfway through the 1100s, was a very good time for Jews in Spain. Jews had high positions in the government. They were ministers of finance, secretaries of state. They were diplomats. There was one even, his name is Reb Shmuel HaNagid. And Reb Shmuel HaNagid, he lived from 1013, trying to remember, from 993 to 1055. He even was second to the king of Granada, which was another kingdom within Spain. So Jews had risen to great heights. They were poets, they were philosophers, they were mathematicians and astronomers, in addition to, of course, tremendous Torah learning of the Mishnah of the Tanaim and the Gemara of the Amoraim, and all the Sfarim, all the books that were written for the Gaonim, by the Gaonim. And Jews were doing very, very well. Jews were doing very, very well in Spain. But the Rambam comes towards the end of the Tkufat HaZahav, the Golden Age. So I have to set it up for you. Bear with me so I can set it up for you as a backdrop towards the Rambam's life. Okay, so we have Spain. I teach 11th graders in Beis Rivka, and we do the era of the Rishonim, the medieval scholars, and we do the Sfardim, and we do the Ashkenazim. And I'm so excited that we're up to talking about the Rambam, Maimonides, and which I love when it falls out that we're talking about the Rambam when it's the Rambam's Yartzeit. After I finish the Rambam, I'm going to go back towards the 900s and do the Ashkenazim and then come back after that. So we jump from the Sfardim to the Ashkenazim and then back again. So I said I was going to give you the backdrop to the Rambam's life. So the Rambam lived in southern Spain, as we said, in Cordova. So what was happening? In around 1150s, I need you to picture this if you can. In 1150s, the Almohads, which you just heard on the video, the Almohads were a fanatic group of Muslims. And they came from North Africa, right, just crossing the Mediterranean Sea at its very narrowest point, right, Strait of Gibraltar. And they come into Spain. And the Almohads were fanatic Muslims. And the Almohads said, I don't understand what's going on. Why are there Jews living in Spain under Muslim rule, Islamic rule, and they have high positions, and they have yeshivas, and they have shuls, and certain cities had 20, 30 shuls. They said, I'm sorry, but Islam, I don't know if they said, I'm sorry, they said Islam demands convert or die. Either you convert to Islam or you will be killed. So this is around the 1150s with a tremendous amount of bribery, yeah. They added some of them, not all of them. Some of the Muslim Almohad leaders added another option, and that option was for the Jews to flee. So let's see what we have. Rambam is living he's 15 years old. He's living in southern Spain when the Almohads come in. He's 15 when the Almohads come in 1150. I want you to know that at that point, the Rambam's father, Reb Maimon, because Reb Moshe ben Maimon, Reb Maimon was alive. He was of Beistin, of the head of the judicial courts, the Jewish courts in Cordova. The Rambam was also able to trace his way all the way back to David HaMelech. And there had already been almost at least 5 generations of great leaders, Jewish leaders in Cordova, the Rambam's great and great grandfather, etc. There were 5 generations, including the Rambam's father of Maimon and the Rambam. They had been very much part of the development in the Tufas Hazav of the yeshivas and the great Rishonim and the great scholars. They were leaders of the Jewish people. So the Rambam at this point, he's 15 years old. He's had a complete education. A lot of it by his father. His father, Reb Maimon, was his primary teacher, and a lot of it self-taught. And when I say a complete education, I don't just mean the Mishnah, of course, Tanakh, and the Torah, and then the Mishnah written by the Amoraim, and the Gemara written by the Mishnah written by the Tanaim, and the Gemara written by the Amoraim, and all the Sfarim, all the books that were written by the Gaonim and early Rishonim from the 1000. He also was a mathematician. At this point, he had studied astronomy and mathematics and philosophy, linguist as well, different languages. So the Rambam is 15 years old, and I also always tell my student, okay, the Almohads have come in. Let's see, let's picture this. I'm imagining that the Maimon family had a meeting to decide where should we go. So the Maimon is alive, the Rambam's father. The Rambam's mother died at childbirth when she was giving birth to the Rambam. I think that Maimon has already remarried, and the Rambam has siblings. He has a brother, David, who was very, very dear to him. So I asked my students, give me ideas. Where should the Maimon family go? And we go through different places, and they see where it was really almost impossible. So the Maimon family decides that they will go from southern Spain to northern Spain. Now, what's happening in northern Spain? Well, the Tufas Hazav, the golden age of Spain, has also come to an end in the north. Why? So I asked my students, what country borders Spain to the north? And as you know, it's France. By the 1150s, we already have what the history books call the Reconquista, which means in English, that's Spanish, which means in English the reconquest of Spain by the Christians. So I asked my students, why do we call it the reconquest of Spain? So obviously that Spain was under Christian rule, 400s, 500s, 600s, very barbaric Christian tribes. And then in the year 711, which no surprise is an easy date for the girls to remember, the year 711, the Muslims came and took Spain away from the Christians. The only country in Europe that will be under Islamic rule for 400 or 500 years will be Spain. So the French Christians are, hey, this is during the time of the Crusades. So they're saying, why are we going all the way to Israel to fight the Muslims when we have Muslims right here in our own backyard? So the Christians in France start to take over Spain. when the Christians came, they took the Jews from being a privileged society under the Muslims. Yes, they had to pay taxes. There were certain laws under the Muslims that a shul couldn't be higher than a mosque, but they were doing okay mostly. But now the Christians come in and they go from being a privileged society to being a tortured, persecuted minority. So the Sephardim, who are not used to such treatment of convert or die, are now going to feel like what it felt like for Ashkenazim always. Because in Ashkenaz, France, Germany, never under Muslim rule, just for a very short time, but then they were kicked out. And they've been under Christian rule all along till today. So the Sephardic Jews are not used to this treatment. So we're having a two-pronged problem. From the south, the Almohads, fanatic Muslims. From the north, the Christians taking over northern Spain. So the Maimon family, we're going to do now the travels of the Rambam, and then we'll talk about his books. The Maimon family decides, you know what? We're going to try to live in northern Spain. They hope, there is an equation I like to tell my students. There is an equation that sometimes works, okay? What it is, it's service plus loyalty sometimes equals protection. So the Maimon family thought, you know, the Christians are new to town and we've been here for 100 years. Maybe they need us. We know the lay of the land. And maybe we will be protected because service plus loyalty perhaps will equal protection. Unfortunately, that doesn't happen. So the Maimon family are going to be moving from place to place in northern Spain, tried one city, the persecution was too hard, went to another city. It wasn't going well for them. So everyone's with me? If I had a map, you know, as my students do, I'm not that good with sharing my screen, so I decided I hope that you'll picture it as I talk, okay? So they've moved from southern Spain to northern Spain, not going well under the Christians in northern Spain. When suddenly the Maimon family gets a letter from the Jews of Fez. You know probably that Fez is a city in Morocco. And Morocco is one of the countries in North Africa. Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, Egypt, Libya, and Egypt. So a letter comes to the Maimon family telling them that if you would come to Fez, Morocco, we can guarantee that you can live openly as Jews. We'll have to talk about that, but before we do, so the Maimon family decides now they're going to cross the whole of Spain, through the north to the middle of Spain, and then till the southern tip of Spain, cross the Mediterranean Sea and come to Morocco, North Africa. I want you to know a few things. And I tell my students that, you know, I feel that learning Jewish history gives people tremendous pride because this is who we come from. These are our ancestors. And this is who we learn every day when we learn Rambam, Sefer Mitzvahs, whatever it is. The Maimon family had to travel cross the whole of Spain, running away from the Christians in the north and trying to evade the attention of the Almohads in the south. The Rambam writes that there were times that all they ate were berries, and they were looking for shelter, and they were living in caves. And all they needed, they kept just looking for water, food, shelter. And I tell the girls, I said, let me ask you, I know that sometimes I read books and the people will say, we had a terrible time of it and we lived like animals. And I tell the girls, just the opposite here. This will give you a lot of pride. The Maimon family did not live like animals. They lived like superior human beings. Because I asked the girls, what do you think they were doing as they were running? There are people who say, we live like animals. We were just looking for shelter and food and drink. The Maimon family, what do you think? And this is going to take them 10 years from southern Spain through different parts of northern Spain, and then crossing the whole of Spain. And the girls answer, they were learning, and they were writing, and they were producing and creating. One of the Sfarim that the Rambam is going to, I don't know what it means, publish at that time, is going to be a sefer that he wrote in his early 20s as he's running away from Spain and coming to Fez. I also want to say one other thing very quickly. When the Rambam talks about Muslims and Christians, he's not saying it from something he heard someone else say. No, the Rambam is saying from his own personal experience, okay? That Rambam was under Muslim rule. The Rambam was under Christian rule. Lahavdil to William Shakespeare, the great William Shakespeare, writes The Merchant of Venice, and he has Shylock, big hook nose, right? The Jew, humpback, money grubbing moneylender. Do you know that Shakespeare could not have seen a Jew? Shakespeare lived in the 1500s. The Jews were expelled from England in 1290, and they only returned in 1660. So he, the great Shakespeare, wrote a caricature, a stereotype of a Jew that he heard from. It was a real Bubbenmeister. Maybe he heard it from his grandmother, nothing that he himself lived through. Okay. The Maimon family comes to Fez. I was just about to say girls, but okay, we're girls. Ladies, I need you to understand what's going on in Fez in the 1160s. Okay? The Almohads are also that's where they came from. They're also in Fez, Morocco. But the situation is very odd. Everything depended on the Almohad leader of your city. How much could you bribe him? So let me tell you what's going on. You have Jews in Fez who have converted to Islam, and they are practicing Judaism with real Mesiras Nefesh, because if they're found, they can be killed. So we're going to call them Marranos, but we're using that word retroactively, right? Because Marranos, that word was coined only in the 1400s. We're in the 1100s, 300 years before. Marranos are somebody that Marranos, I know everyone thinks it means swine, and that it was a word that the Goyim used, so I should use the word of Anusim, which means the forced ones. But I've read that Marranos actually comes from the two words Maris Ayin. It looks to you that I'm a Muslim, but I'm trying to keep as much Yiddishkeit as I can. Okay, so there were some of those Jews, okay? And that were living with Mesiras Nefesh as Marranos. There were some Jews that they had bribed their mayor or governor, whoever it was, with enough money that they had to just say that they believe Muhammad is a prophet, and then they could walk in the street as a Jew. They could have yeshivas. There was a Rav, his name was Harav Sasson, who actually had a yeshiva openly, but officially he was said that he believed. Then there were Jews who, with a lot of money, didn't even have to convert. So what happened was that the Jews of Fez got permission for the Maimon family to live in Fez. Chas v'shalom, they would never have converted, never said anything like that. And then they would be able to live and study and write and live in Fez with special permission. It's not going to last too long. And what's going to happen is, I have a lot to say about that time, but I think I'll talk about it when we talk about the Sfarim that the Rambam wrote at that time. So after a few years of being there, in the middle of the night, someone came running to the Maimon family to tell them that you have to leave. The Almohads are looking for you. They hear that you are leaders of the Jews and you're encouraging them not to convert, but to flee, and they're looking for you. So the Maimon family decides, this is 1160s, The Maimon family decides to go to Eretz Yisrael. Okay, what's the situation in Eretz Yisrael? I'm not getting feedback here, so I'm talking. So if you need to ask me something, I'm sure, or you can ask me at the end. I'll try to answer your questions. Go ahead. Okay.
Amen.
Yes. The Maimon family comes to Eretz Yisrael. I'm not going to talk about the fact that there was one time that they were on the ship, and the Rambam writes how they thought that they wouldn't make it. And years later, people of the Maimon family would fast on that day. And then they finally come to Eretz Yisrael, and years later, the Maimon family, descendants of the Rambam, would have a Sudas Haida on that day. The Maimon family comes to Eretz Yisrael. In the 1160s, it's between the second and the third crusade. The situation is dire. It's a terrible situation. The Christians took over Eretz Yisrael in 1096. That's the first crusade. That's the only crusade that they actually won. By 1145, they're asking for reinforcements because the Muslims are regrouping and trying to get Eretz Yisrael back. So that's the second crusade. And the second crusade did not go well for the Christians. So let's say it like this. Eretz Yisrael was a battlefield between the Muslims and the Christians, and a very dangerous place to go. But the Maimon family, the Rambam and the Maimon, the Rambam's father, had such a strong desire to live in Eretz Yisrael, they thought they would try. They came to Eretz Yisrael and they quickly saw how terrible the situation was. The Maimon family were settled in northern Eretz Yisrael. There's a city called Akko, and this is going to sound ironic, but that was the capital of the Crusaders. And so it's interesting that the Jews who came later or survived the first crusade, they lived there. Sounds crazy, but the Crusaders made it their capital. They're not fighting over that area, and they need the Jews, so that became the safest. The Maimon family one day decided that we need to hire a guide. We want to go to Yerushalayim. We want to go to the Kesel, Marsa Machpelah, Kever Rachel. The guide took them, and they were like 2 days out on their trip. And the guide said, I never planned to take, to bring you all the way there. Took their money and was going to kill them. And there's a whole story. There's so many books about the Rambam that you could read. How they managed to survive. The group went by and saw what was going on, and they managed to survive. But they very quickly realized that it was not a good place for them to live. Actually, the Jews of Eretz Yisrael really almost asked them, could you please leave? Because they said it's going to be too hard for us to protect you. We know who you are at Maimon, and we know who the Rambam is. He's already published Svarim. And they very often, if there was a very important Jew, either the Muslims or the Christians would kidnap him, the Rambam or the Maimon, and hold them for ransom for huge, exorbitant sums. And you know what? The Maimon family, the Rambam, was a leader. To be a leader of the Jewish people, you need to have certain amount of peace. Write your Svarim, write letters. The Rambam corresponded with Jews all over, from North Africa, from Spain, from Yemen. We'll talk about it, Eretz Yisrael, Italy, France, and Germany. So they had to leave Eretz Yisrael. Everybody with me? Okay. So we had southern Spain, northern Spain. What's next? Southern Spain, northern Spain, Fez, Morocco, Eretz Yisrael. And now we're going to talk about the next and final place where the Rambam family moved. They're going to go from Eretz Yisrael to Egypt. The first question that anytime I speak about Rambam and in my classes that comes up is, but I thought you're not allowed to live in Egypt. It is true that it says that, and there is actually says in 3 places. Most people or Rabbanim who paskin say that that really is when Eretz Yisrael is during the time of the Beis Hamikdash and under Jewish rule, and it doesn't pertain to a time of galus and persecution, which was definitely that time. But I want them to know that, of course, the Rambam knew that halacha. I tried to bring the girls up a little bit in their knowledge and understanding of the Rambam. You see, they learn about the Rambam every year since they're in preschool. And for many years, they've been bringing home a Tylenol box or a picture because the Rambam was a doctor, right? So I tell them, though, that the synonymous with the Rambam's name should be one word. If we were playing a game and I said, what's the first thing you should think about when you hear the word Rambam? The answer is halacha, because that is what the Rambam wrote, and we'll talk about that in a minute. So the Rambam knew, and I wanted to tell you, please, I'll say it twice if you want to write it down. The Rambam would sign off his letters while he was in Egypt. And this is how he signed off. Anochi Moshe ben Maimon Hasfaradi. I am Moshe ben Maimon from the Sfardi. Ha'oiver, that means who transgresses, Avera. B'chol yom, every day, b'shloisha lavim. A lav is a mitzvah loisase. He's telling us, I know that there is halacha. I'm not trying to sweep it under the rug. And I'm telling you, I know. I don't have a choice, obviously. Otherwise, he would have gone somewhere else. But I want you to know that I know. Anochi ben Moshe ben Maimon Hasfaradi, ha'oiver b'chol yom, who transgresses every day in three b'shloisha lavim, in three mitzvahs loisaseh, because it says it 3 times in the Torah. They are heterim, etc. The Rambam wanted to be honest and tell it like it was. Okay. On the way to Egypt, the Reb Maimon, the Rambam's father, dies. He passes away. Some people say he was in Eretz Yisrael. Some people say it was closer to Egypt. Okay. The Maimon family comes without Maimon, but the Rambam, he has a brother, his name is David, and they settle in Cairo. Very shortly after that, there was a plague that broke out in Egypt, in Cairo, and the Rambam lost his wife and some of his children. And a little while after that, somebody came to tell the Rambam some terrible news. The Rambam had a brother whose name was David, and David was a gemstone dealer. And he, David, supported his own family, David's family, and his brother, Rambam's family, because his brother sat and learned and wrote and etc. Someone comes to tell the Rambam that his brother, who was traveling to purchase gemstones, was lost at sea. There was a shipwreck, and everyone on the ship had died. They say that, there's a good book about the Rambam for younger kids. It's called The Rambam. It's written by Mrs. Yafi, who lives in Crown Heights. I don't know if you know that book. It has like a fuchsia, like a magenta color. And they say that the Rambam was so sick from all the tragedies. He lost his father, his wife, some of his children, and now his brother, that he took to his bed for almost a year. And the way she describes it is that the Rambam was ill from all the tragedies. And then one day he looks out the window and he sees his brother David's children playing with the Rambam's children. I think the Rambam had remarried. And he realized, oh no, now I have to support not only my brother's children, but my children. So that is when the Rambam became a doctor. Very, very quickly, the Rambam became well known and became a doctor to the Sultan of Egypt. His name was Saladin, and he becomes his doctor and confidant and diplomat. I have here a letter that I read with my students, and it's called the Rambam's Daily Schedule. This is a letter that the Rambam wrote to one of his Talmidim. Actually, this letter is written to his Talmud, who was his translator. The Rambam, as we'll see soon, wrote some of his Sfarim in Arabic. And then, because he was running and busy, he had a family of translators. They were the Ibn Tibon, Ibn meaning son of, Ibn Tibon family. There was Reb Shmuel, Reb Yehuda Ibn Tibon, like grandfather. It's a special talent. So this Reb Shmuel Ibn Tibon writes to the Rambam, he's living in Spain, I'd like to come visit you in Egypt. And the Rambam basically says to him, please don't, because I won't have time to speak to you. So the Rambam says, I think you'll be amazed at this. The Rambam says, let me tell you my schedule. And the Rambam says, I wake up every morning and I go to the Sultan's palace and I spend a good part of my day. He says, even if the Sultan is fine, but there are people of his harem, different wives, some of the royal officers. And after I spend that day, I come home. He says, I am so very tired. But as I approach the house, I see a long line of people, a multitude of people who are waiting to be seen by the Rambam. The Rambam says a mixed multitude of people, judges and bailiffs, wealthy, poor, they've all coming to see the Rambam. They've heard about the Rambam, the great doctor. So he says, I go over to them. I love this letter. You can look it up and find it. I wrote, excuse me, just 1 second. Could you close these two doors just for 1 minute? Thank you so much. Sorry about that. I just didn't know if you were picking up the noise. Okay. The Rambam says, I go over to my patients and I beg them to let me partake in a small meal, the only meal I eat in 24 hours, which is interesting because the Rambam tells us to eat 3 meals a day, but this is the Rambam we're talking about. And he says, and then I stay up till well into the night, prescribing for their various ailments. He says, I'm so tired at a certain point that I'm writing out prescriptions while lying down. The Rambam says, in consequence of this, I only can speak to the Yidden who live in Cairo. The Rambam's their Rav, they have a shul, the Rambam's their teacher. I can only speak with them on Shabbos. He says, so on Shabbos day, we learn before Shachris, after Shachris, till Mincha, and then between Mincha and Ma'ariv. So I asked my students, so what doesn't he include? And they say, when does he write? When does he learn? When does he write? Of course, there'll be always some girls. When does he speak to his family? Okay, sure. And the Rambam obviously did that throughout the night and hardly slept, because we're going to see all the amazing Sfarim that the Rambam is going to write. Okay. The Rambam dies in the year 1204. I just want to make sure I'm not, okay. The Rambam dies on Chaf Teves, which is this coming Monday, the year 1204. And that's 891? Yeah, maybe. Well, 1204, we're at 20. My sister is the math teacher on history. Not so good at that. The Rambam died in Cairo, but the Rambam asked to be buried in Tveria, which is in northern Eretz Yisrael. There are many stories, Chaya was talking about this before, of what happened. So there are different versions. There was trouble when the Yidden came with the Rambam's Aron, with the Rambam's coffin, on the was it a donkey, a camel? I'm not sure. So there are different versions. Some people say that the Muslims started to attack them and they had to run away. And the Rambam, the donkey or the camel went on its own to Tveria, and that's where the Rambam was buried by the Yidden in Tveria. There are those that say that that when the Muslims came and they felt the Kedusha, the holiness of the Rambam, and they let the Jews go. We're not sure. There's also a lot of question on why did the Rambam want to be buried in Tveria? That was what he wanted to, and there are a lot of answers, but one thing I can tell you is the last place that the Sanhedrin met after the Churban and before it was disbanded under the Romans was Tveria. So there is the idea that when Mashiach comes, the Sanhedrin will begin in Tveria. And who more should be part of the Sanhedrin than the Rambam? We're talking about halacha, right? Okay. Now what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the Rambam Sfarim. Fascinating, fascinating information. Okay. Ready? I know it's a lot. Everybody's okay. I'm not seeing a lot of faces, so I'm hoping it's good. I'm nodding. Okay, we're getting a thumbs up. Great. The first sefer that the Rambam wrote is his Perush on Mishnayos. Okay. The Mishnah was written as a first book of Torah Sheba'al Peh by the Tanaim that were from the year 60.
Mrs. Lerman, we're
Yes.
going to have questions soon, but could you just translate all the verses that you're saying?
Absolutely.
Thank
I'm
you so
sorry
much.
that I forgot.
No
The
problem.
Rambam is going to write a commentary on the Mishnah. The Mishnah was written by the Tanaim. The Tanaim were from the year 68 after the destruction of the second Beis Hamikdash until the year circa 200. Torah Sheba'al Peh, oral law, had never been written down before. But the Tanaim, the Jewish leaders at that time, realized that the Romans had made such a decree against learning Torah that if they found you, not only were you killed, but the people of your city were killed. And not only were the people of your city, but cities surrounding. So they were afraid that Torah would be lost. Torah, the oral Torah that had been passed down from generation to generation, from Moshe till all the way till the year the first century of the Common Era, they were afraid, and so they decided to write down the oral law. It's written in Mishnaic Hebrew. It's written in Hebrew, but you have to realize that it's already 1,000 years when Maimonides, when the Rambam is writing this commentary. And he wanted to make sure that everybody learns the Mishnah. So he decided to write, a commentary on the Mishnah. 3 innovations. I'm going to do this a little quicker. 3 innovations to his commentary on the Mishnah. Number 1, he wrote it in Arabic. He wanted everybody, even people who are not Torah scholars, to be able to learn the Mishnah. And the Jews, many of the Jews of North Africa and Spain, not many, probably all the Jews, spoke Arabic. The second innovation is, as I said before, he hired a family of translators to translate it. Who for? Well, for us, to translate it into Hebrew, for the Ashkenazim who were living in France and Germany, etc. The third innovation, I'm going to talk real quickly, is that to certain chapters in Mishnah, in the Mishnayos, in the Mishnah, the Rambam stops and says, before I explain this chapter, I'm going to write an introduction. Those introductions, in Hebrew it's called hakdamas, have become so famous in their own right, besides the commentary on the Mishnah, that you will see, if you go after this class, and you look at your set of Rambam, of the Yad HaChazaka, you will see that they add some other books, and one of them will say the Hakdamas, the introduction to the Rambam's Parish, his commentary on the Mishnah. I'm just going to tell you two famous commentaries, two famous introductions, I'm sorry. A lot of people know that the Maimonides, that the Rambam wrote the 13 Principles of Faith, Yud Gimel Ikre Emunah, but they're not sure where it was. Well, I'm telling it to you. It's in the introduction to a chapter in the Mishnah. You know that there's a chapter that's called the chapter Chelek. That means because it starts with a pasuk from the Torah, a passage from the Torah, a verse from the Torah, and that all the girls guessed it because it's one of the 12 psukim of the Rebbe that taught us to teach our children at every gathering. We should recite them. Kol Yisrael Yesham Chelek Ba'olam Haba. Every Jew has a portion in the world to come. So the Rambam says, hey, before we talk about that, do you believe in the world to come? What are the 13 principles of belief? And that's where the Yud Gimel Ani Mamin, the 13 Ani Mamin, I believe, is written there. Another famous one, I think I'm just going to skip it, but it's called Shmeina Prakim. I don't want to go on too long. This solidified the Rambam's in his early 20s. It was written when he was in Fez. He wrote it, it was published, whatever published means, for 300 years before the printing press, but that means written over and put out to the public in his early 20s, solidifies him as a leader of the Jewish people already in his early 20s. The next thing I want to talk about is the Rambam wrote a letter, and it's called Igeres Hashmad, the letter of conversion. It's also called a mimer, a discourse on Kiddush Hashem, on sanctifying God's name. Let me tell you what happened. I think this will be something you'll share with others, maybe on Shabbos at the table. What happened was that there were Jews in Fez, Morocco, and other parts of North Africa who had converted to Islam, trying to keep as many mitzvot as they can. What happened was that one of the Jews who was of Marano, right, converted to Islam, and with a lot of self-sacrifice, trying to keep mitzvahs, he wrote a letter to, I'm going to use air quotes, a so-called Rav. Didn't live in North Africa. And he asked him, I love reading letters because with questions, Shilas and Shuvas, it's called questions that are posed to different Rabbanim. It teaches you so much history. And the letter that he wrote was, I am a convert. I'm trying to keep mitzvot. Tell me, how should I act in this difficult persecution? And the letter he got back was obviously not from a Chabadnik, okay? You'll hear what this rabbi told him. The so-called rabbi told him, if you convert, don't do any mitzvot, don't do any commandments, because God hates you. Now, if I want to try to find out what he was trying to do, perhaps he was thinking that this would stem the tide of the conversions that were happening but let me tell you that the Rambam heard about this letter. And the Rambam writes a letter back, like I said, called the Letter of Conversion, Igeres Hashmad, or Maimer Kiddush Hashem. And the Rambam is going to make around 7-8 points in his letter. I have it in English. The Rambam says like this. He says, when I read this letter that this rabbi wrote, it made me so angry I wanted to just not finish it. But he says, I realized if I have to comment on something, I need to read it till the end. He says, now that I read it at the end, these are my views. Number one, he says, the gravity of maligning a Jew. he says, how could he speak badly about Jews? And the Rambam brings examples from Tanakh of how God was not happy with Moshe, who spoke once badly of Jews, and with Eliyahu Navi, who spoke badly about the Jews. They were saying the right thing, but how God, the Eibusher, really does not like it. So how can you speak badly about Jews? That's point number 2. I don't know. Then the Rambam says, let me tell you what I feel. I feel that if you die by you sanctify, it's called Kiddush Hashem, you sanctify God's name. But that's not what God wants. God wants us, it says, V'chai b'hem, that we should live with Torah and mitzvah, not die. But if you died al Kiddush Hashem and you did not convert, it makes a huge Kiddush Hashem. If you convert, it is a huge Chilul Hashem. That means a desecration of God's name. It's true. Then the Rambam says there is a little bit of a difference. I'm not a halacha teacher to help you with all the halachot and all the laws of avodah zarah, of false gods, serving other gods. But there is a difference between Christianity and Islam. I'm not telling the girls that they should go into a mosque, but technically Islam is a monotheistic religion, not like Christianity, which is a trinity. And Yashka is thought as a god, son of God, born from immaculate conception, not in the normal human way. And they have crosses and different icons, and different statues. A mosque is an empty room. We're not going to go into that. So the Rambam doesn't say you should convert. The Rambam says the best thing is to flee and not to stay behind because I'm going to lose my house, I'm going to lose my business, I'm going to lose my home. If you can, the Rambam's only telling them advice that he took, right? Southern Spain, Northern Spain, now in Fez, and then Eretz Yisrael. I want you to know, because I tell this to the girls a lot. Girls say to me, Lerman, why didn't they just leave? Why didn't they just leave? And I tell them, it was very hard. Do you know, in 1492, when the Jews were expelled from the Spanish expulsion, when the Jews were expelled from Spain, 35,000, I think that number will surprise you, 35,000 Jews died just traveling from Spain. Disease, unhygienic conditions, starvation, ships were not seaworthy, shipwrecks, etc. But tried to flee. And then the Rambam says something that I think of a lot. And the girls were very taken with it as well. The Rambam says, it could be that you've converted to Islam. It could be that you have not been able to keep kosher and you had to eat non-kosher, or you maybe ate chametz on Pesach. You know what the Rambam says? I think it's going to shock you. But if it's Shabbos and you're going outside, empty your pocket. Like, really? I mean, I didn't give my child a bris, but I should be worried? Yes, because carrying on Shabbos is not allowed. And every mitzvah that you do, every commandment that you keep, you become closer to God. And every commandment that you transgress, you puts you further away from God. And so therefore, you may think, really? Yes, one of the 39 prohibited work that was done in the Mishkan is carrying, and you're not allowed to carry from a private domain to a public domain. And so therefore, and you may not think it makes a big difference, but every time you do a commandment, you feel closer to God. And if you don't, there's in Chassidus, they talk about Timtum Halev, a stuffing up of the heart. So this is, the girls got very excited. They said, of course, that's why the Rebbe says put on tefillin. And people would say, but why? They don't have a bris. It doesn't matter. Every mitzvah brings you closer. And this letter saved the Jewish people of North Africa. Why? Because when the Almohads moved on, they were still keeping as much as they could, and they came out and they became full-fledged committed Jews again. If they would have not had the letter, they would say, listen, I'm trying my best, but the Eibusha hates it, so that's it. But not only did it help the Jews of North Africa, throughout our persecution, this letter has been a very important letter to Jews all over the world. I'm moving on. The Rambam in 1170 to 1180 will take 10 years to write his magnum opus. And the Rambam's masterpiece is called the Mishnah Torah. Mishnah Torah means the second Torah. It is also known as the Yad, that's Yud and a Daled, HaChazaka, the strong arm. Yad, meaning arm, is spelled Yud and a Daled. The numerical value is 14. Why is it called the Yad HaChazaka? Because the Rambam took all halacha and he divided it into 14 categories. And so people call it either Mishnah Torah or Yad HaChazaka, the Yad HaChazaka. And if you listen to the video that Chaya showed, the Rebbe refers sometimes, I think I heard it in the video, Hayad, just the hand, the arm, the Yudala, the 14 sections of the Mishnah Torah. And if someone says to you, I'm learning Rambam, that's what they mean. The Rebbe taught us and set up the campaign, and some people learned 3 chapters of the Yad HaChazaka of the Mishnah Torah, the Rambam's masterpiece. And some people learn 1 parak a day. If you learn 3 prakim, 3 chapters a day, it takes a year, 3 years if you do 1 parak a day. Before he sat down to write this book, the Rambam wrote Sefer HaMitzvot. It's a different book. In Sefer HaMitzvot, the Rambam enumerates the 613 mitzvahs. 2 things. How do we know that there are 613 mitzvahs? Doesn't say in the Torah, okay, we're in Bereshis, there's a mitzvah to have children, pru or avu, that's mitzvah 1. It would be nice if there was a number, but no. The reason we know there are 613 mitzvahs is because it's Taras Moshe, halacha l'Moshe miSinai. Moshe Rabbeinu told us there are 613 mitzvahs, and we know that there is. But sometimes it's hard to know which one is a mitzvah. If it says that the Jew should do this, and then the next pasuk says the Kohen should do it, is that a separate mitzvah or is it part of the others? So before the Rambam came, many different svarim enumerating the mitzvahs. And there were arguments. Then the Rambam wrote Sefer Mitzvahs. These are the 613 mitzvahs, and everybody accepts that. Now, the Rambam said, I need to take halacha from the Gemara, the Talmud. It was written from the year 200 to 500 in Babylonia, in Bavel. The Rambam says, 500 years, like almost 600 years past the sealing and the completion of the Talmud. He says it's 600 years later, and it's very hard for people to keep Torah and the mitzvot because it's written in the Gemara, and it could talk about Shabbos here, and then it could talk about Shabbos 60 pages later, and it's hard to know how to practically apply it. I have to do a lot of learning to get my answer. So if I would go to a Rav and I would say, I have this shaila, this question, he would say to me, okay, come back in a month, okay? Because he has to learn a little bit about Shabbos here, if it's a question about Shabbos, a little bit in this Masechta, in Baba Metzia, in Brachas, in Ksuvas, whatever. This is the greatness of what the Rambam did. He took all of halacha, of Jewish law, and he categorized it into 14 categories. So you know that everything about daily life is here. Everything about the sacrifices, karbanos, is here. Everything about Mashiach is at the end. And his seder, his order, his organization is so, in Yiddish, and we say, in Hebrew, you say meduyak. It's so specific that sometimes we have sichas of the Rebbe that you know halacha from where it's placed, that he put it here instead of there. Took him 10 years to write it. He writes it from 1170 to 1180. I know I need to wind down, so I'm just going to tell you. The Mishnah Torah, the Rambam says in his introduction, I've girded myself. I'm going to write down all halacha so that people will not need any other book. They'll have Tanakh, they'll learn Torah Shebachsav, the written law, and they'll learn Mishnah Torah, the second Torah, and they will have all of Torah Shebal Peh, of the oral law, and they will not need another sefer. The interesting thing is that there are so many Sfarim on the Rambam commentary that it's interesting. He says you won't need another sefer, and this sefer, this book, spawned so many more Sfarim. I want to continue, but I think maybe I should stop. I had two other things I want to tell you that the Rambam wrote. I have to I want you so much to understand what it is. And when you say Sefer Mitzvahs, you are saying the mitzvahs not as they appear in the Torah, but in the order of the Mishnah Torah of the Rambam. So when we say Sefer Mitzvahs, let me try to remember, this morning was about lending, getting a few loans to a non-Jew, right? Sometimes when it's because the ones who are learning 3 chapters of Rambam are learning about that. You know how sometimes you say the same Sefer Mitzvahs a few years in a row? The reason for that is because they haven't finished yet, the ones who are doing 3 chapters a day, with all the halachot that are on that mitzvah. And that's why we continue saying it a few times until they're done. Nobody has surpassed the Rambam. He has everything, even things that have to do with Eretz Yisrael only. Leket, Shikhapeya, Meister Bikurim, everything is in the Rambam. It's an encyclopedia of Jewish law. I want to mention 2 other things, and I'm going to stop. The Rambam wrote a very famous letter called Igeres Teiman. Teiman means Yemen. The Jews of Yemen wrote a letter to the Rambam while he was living in Egypt, saying, please help us. The Jews of Yemen, this was towards the end of the 1100s, the Jews of Yemen were having a 3-pronged problem. Number 1, they were being forcibly converted by the Yemenites. Now we say Yemen, we think of, what are they called? The Houthis. Anyway, number 2, unfortunately, there were Jews of Yemen who had converted to Islam, and now they were trying to convert other Jews. They were the leaders in the drive to convert the Jews to Islam. So the Jews were confused because they were bringing psukim that supposedly talks about Muhammad. And number 3, there was a false Messiah. And my students always say, oh, Shabtai Tzvi. No, Shabtai Tzvi was in the 1600s, we're in the 1100s. There have been others. Everyone knows Shabtai Tzvi because he was the most famous and did the most damage. The Rambam helped them by writing a letter to them that's called Igeres, the letter Teiman of Yemen. And he explained to them very, very clearly about why they should not convert to Islam and the greatness of Torah, and how to understand these passages that they took these people who had converted, Jews, unfortunately, who had converted, and they were trying to make it seem like it's telling them that they should have, God forbid, accepted Muhammad. And what does Mashiach look like? What's Cheskas Mashiach? And it's amazing, but he saved the Jews of Yemen. It also didn't hurt that the Rambam was very close to Saladin, the Sultan of Egypt, who he asked him if he could intercede on the behalf of the Jews of Yemen, telling the Yemenite princes and kings to stop with the persecution of Jews. But they considered that he saved them. And they were so appreciative that that's so interesting that while he was alive, they inserted the Rambam into their davening, into their prayers. When we say Kaddish, we say B'chayechon, that Mashiach should come in your lives, B'yamechom, in your days, U'b'chayei kol Beis Yisrael. So they inserted the Rambam's name. Isn't this interesting? They would say B'chayechon u'v'yamechon u'b'chayei Reb Moshe ben Maimon, and then u'b'chayei kol Beis Yisrael. They inserted the Rambam's name, what a sign of respect, into Kaddish. Very interesting. And when in 1950, after Israel gained their independence, and it became very difficult to live in any Muslim country, when the Yemenites came to Eretz Yisrael, I think it was called Operation Magic Carpet, they came and they were from very sincere Jews. And this is 800 years after the Rambam. And they still attributed their devotion to Torah and to mitzvahs to the Rambam and how he saved them in the 1100s. So I find that letter very interesting. And the last letter that I'm going to just tell you very quickly in 1 or 2 sentences is the Rambam's work called the Moreh Nevuchim. Moreh means a guide, a teacher. Navuch is someone who's lost. In English, it's called the Guide for the Perplexed. Students of his were learning a lot of secular and specifically Aristotelian philosophy in Spain. And they asked the Rambam, could you write us a book explaining to us what parts of secular philosophy we believe in, what parts we don't, what's our view on these different issues. And so the Rambam wrote this book called Moreh Nevuchim. I think I spoke enough. I could go on for a very long time, obviously.
I think we're going to need a part 2, but we have a lot of questions that came in.
Okay, sure.
That's okay. And if anyone wants to ask more questions, please send it now. But before we do ask the questions, I'm just going to I'll give you a little break. You can have a little drink and a little snack. I'm going to just give a roll call of where everyone's from. We do a roll call weekly in honor of Rabbi Kotlarsky. Now, for those of you that are new, Rabbi Kotlarsky would always do a roll call at the Kinnos HaShluchim and Shluchos, each Kinnos for the men and women separately. And we adapted this a couple of years ago where we would take all the ladies on and say where we're from. So tonight we had I believe 53 ladies joining live. And I'm going to say where we're all from. And it's pretty amazing how we can learn Torah from all different places. We also have a lot of people that listen to the recordings from all different places. So please let me know where you listen to once you listen to it so we can also announce it. So here goes. So tonight we have with us Staten Island, Cedarhurst, Palm Springs, California, Ottawa, Canada, Toronto, Crown Heights, Mexico City, Bay Harbor, Florida, Queens, New York, Montreal, which we said already, LA, California, Glendale, California, Long Beach, California. And those are the places that we have on today from all different cities and states, and it's incredible. So here goes. Couple of questions. Some of them are heavy, some of them are great. If any of them you don't want to answer, you can say pass. Okay. Did the Rambam have any other professions, like jobs, other than being a doctor to make money?
So it's interesting. In those days, I tell my students, every great Rishon, every great rabbi, or even yeshiva, they were not paid. There was no such thing as tuition. And being a rabbi was not a paying job. So so you always had to have some other way that where you would to for your livelihood. But I don't know. I don't know, and I always say I could find out more, and I could put it in, send it to you, and you could post it next week or whenever. So I don't know that he was anything besides. They say that he actually learned a lot about medicine when he was younger, actually in North Africa. Not that I know of, though, any other.
Okay, thank you. Do you know the names of the Rambam's wife or wives, or how many wives did he have?
I think he had two. I don't know the names. Sorry. Again, I hope to remember what you're asking, and I could do more.
Okay, just follow up on that. Do you know how many children he had?
No, I know that he had a son who was a very strong defender of the Rambam. Something we didn't talk about, as you said, part two, is that there was tremendous controversy over the Rambam Sfarim, the Mishnah Torah, and the Moreh Nevuchim, and his philosophy book. So he had a son whose name was Rabbi Avram ben Rambam. I don't know exactly.
Okay, so maybe we can, excuse me, maybe we can answer this in short, but based on what you just said, the question was, why were some Jews against the Rambam?
Okay, first of all, we're very skeptical people. So when somebody does something so new, like the Rambam did, where he's making an encyclopedia of halacha, there are going to be people who are going to be, okay, is this good for us? Is this not good for us? Will people stop learning Gemara? Why do they have to if they have it right there? I mean, and I'll give you two specific reasons for the controversy. Because of time, when the Rambam wrote his Mishnah Torah, he does not write his sources. He doesn't say, this is the view of Rabbi Kiva, right, who's was one Atana in the Mishnah, or it's from Rav or Shmuel, or Reish Lakish, or Rabbi Yochanan, Rava, this Amora, this Tana. So people were upset with that because he would give a ruling and tell the halacha, but he didn't say who his sources were. And the Rambam did answer to that while he was alive, because really the controversy happened after his death, more in 1210, 2030, and even in the 1240s. But he said it was a time constraint. I tell the girls, I say, I could write a paper, read, and then write it in, a couple of hours. It's the footnotes and the bibliography that take a lot of time. Another thing that they were worried about is that Rambam, and this is also the Rebbe speaks so much about it, the Rambam's first line of his Mishnah Torah, there are 14 sections. The first section is called Sefer Hamada, Mem Daled Ayin, which means knowledge. In Hebrew, it means science, I think. The first line of the Mishnah Torah of the Rambam is Yesayda Yesaydes, the Amud HaChachma, Leida Sheyesham Matzoi Rishon. The Rambam is saying that the foundation of all things, of everything, is to know that there is a God. And the Rambam was saying that there is a law, halacha, that one must learn and try to understand Torah and mitzvahs. People got scared because they thought, hey, we knew he was a great man in Spain, but now we haven't seen him in a while. He's living in Egypt. They thought that perhaps, that also remember, he wrote a book of philosophy, that maybe he became, God forbid, an Aristotelian philosopher. And Aristotle promoted rationalism. I only believe what I can rationalize. And they thought that the Rambam was saying, try to understand God, and that's what you should believe. The Rambam does not say that. The Rambam is saying that your knowledge has to grow, and then comes the Munah. But if your knowledge is here, then your Munah starts here. But if your knowledge is here, then your belief starts. And the Rambam actually wrote a letter to one of the Rabbanim, one of the rabbis who was against, and that letter is called Igeres Tchias HaMesim. There's nothing rational about Tchias HaMesim, of the reviving of the dead, and he was trying to show that no, that's not what he meant, and he had not become, God forbid, a rationalist. Go ahead.
Okay.
I hope I explained. Okay.
What are 3 transgressions that the Rambam was referring to?
So the Rambam was referring to 3 times it says in the Torah not to live in Egypt. It mentions it 3 times. It's like, the people always say, be careful and check your lens, because not eating pig is mentioned or is 1 transgression. Eating a bug is 7. Okay. So there are different transgressions that go within that. So that's what it means. So 3 times that it says in the Torah not to live in Egypt. Yeah.
Okay. Another question is, if you can just expand, if you could, okay, so I'm just gonna try to figure out how to word this, but if you converted, like, were you still considered a Jew because it was under force?
Yes. Well, there are many halachot about conversion, and I'm not the one to teach it. I remember Mara Korf taught it to us. You are, officially, okay, I don't know how to say this. Yaharag val yavar, you're supposed to die and not transgress 3 mitzvahs. One is the avera of 3, and not do 3 averas. Avodah zara, okay, shrichas damin, killing somebody, and the 3rd one is gilui arayis, forbidden relationships. And people have died for that, but there are so many nuances in the idea of avodah zara. I remember learning that Mordechai really could have bowed down to Haman, because in his mind, because they said Haman wore like a necklace, remember, that in his mind, he would know that he's bowing down to, he would have the intention that he's bowing to Haman and not to the idol he was holding. But on the other hand, I remember learning as a child, so again, that if wearing a certain shoelace made you part of a Christian group, for example, you wouldn't be allowed to wear that shoelace. So I don't know how to answer that question. I would really think that it needs a much deeper dive into learning. I want to tell you an interesting story that I read. So when the Rebbe and Rebbetzin were living in Paris, so in France, yes. So the Rebbetzin was in the apartment by herself, and a man from the Census Bureau, right, came over to ask her questions, and he asked her for her religion, and she said Orthodox, and he left after a while. When the Rebbe came back to the apartment, the Rebbetzin told the Rebbe that they asked me this question, and I said Orthodox. The reason she said Orthodox, meaning from religious, a Jew, but she, I suppose, was hoping that if it says Orthodox, maybe it could mean Greek Orthodox or Russian Orthodox, right? Which is not Roman Catholic, but it's part of the Christian world. The Rebbe left and went back to the government office to change it. He didn't even want that people should infer that he's saying that he's a guy and not a Jew. So did the Rebbe have to do that? I don't know. I don't know if I'll be halacha. So that's what I'm trying to say. Halachas of avodah zarah has to be learned with someone who knows. I'm not so, I don't know a lot about that topic. But yes, a Jew is always a Jew. A Jew is always a Jew.
We should never be tested.
Right. Exactly.
Just saying,
Yeah,
because we don't know what they were going through. Okay.
Yes.
Like 3 more questions came in.
Sure.
Why did the Rebbe say to learn the Rambam and not the Shulchan Aruch Harav? And why did he start learning only in 5784, which is, I don't know what 5784 is, which year?
1984. 5784? Or you mean 57? No, it's not 5784. We're at 5785. It wasn't last year. She means 5744.
Probably.
1984. Yeah.
Right.
Tafshin Mem Dalet. Why the Rebbe started then, I don't know. Okay, let me explain to you the difference. Okay. First of all, Shulchan Aruch Harav okay. Rambam has all halachas. After the Rambam, nobody does that. Let me explain to you a little bit of the shalshelis, the chain of halacha. You have Mishnah and Gemara. The first person is the Alphys who takes out the halacha, leaves behind all the shaklavitaria, the arguments back and forth in the stories. That's step one. Then you have the Rambam who takes it and makes it into categories, all halacha. That's the last time we have all. The next one is the Tur, who only has 4 sections, nothing to do with Beis Hamikdash, Mashiach, anything about Eretz Yisrael. He has Orach Chaim, day-to-day life, Yaradeya, which is kashrus, basar v'chalav, kosher, Even HaEzer, which is marriage and divorce, and Choshen Mishpat, which is civil and criminal law. That's the Torah. The Shulchan Aruch has also those 4 sections. The Shulchan Aruch Harav also has those 4 sections, but we only actually have 3 because there was a fire, and if I'm not mistaken, the section of Even HaEzer was lost. So the Rambam, as you just watched in the video, the Rambam, the Rebbe writes that the Rambam is the Nesher HaGadol, the eagle, and the Rebbe speaks a lot about the unity that comes from learning the Rambam. So I think that's the answer. I don't think you have the same scope anywhere else.
Okay, thank you. And then can you speak about the time the Rambam helped the Jews of Fez, I think, combat the Tzedukim, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, who take the Torah literally and reject the Torah shel bal peh, if you can
Sure.
explain what
Okay,
Torah
so
shel bal
actually,
peh is as well, because some people.
okay, sure, absolutely. So first of all, they weren't called Tzedukim. They were called Tzedukim during the Second Temple. At this point, they're called Karaites or Karayim. So the Karayim, they began in the 700s during the Gaonic period in Babylon, in Bavel, which was Persia. It began on a very petty note. And what happened was it was the head of the Jewish people, besides their spiritual leader, the Gaon, was called the Reish Galusa, is exarch of the head of the Jewish people in Babylon and in Bavel. This man wanted to be the new exarch. The Jews did not choose him. He got very angry. He says, "You know what? I don't like the rabbis because they didn't choose him. The Rabbanim didn't choose him." And he says, "We believe." Well, not only do I not like the rabbis during that time, the 700s, I don't like the rabbis who wrote the Talmud, and I don't like the rabbis who wrote the Mishnah. And we reject oral law, and we only keep, which is similar to the Tzedukim of the time of in the Second Temple. This is in the 700s. We reject the authenticity of the oral law, and we just keep the written law, Torah Shebechsav. They are called anti-Talmudic Jews. They are also called anti-rabbinic Jews, and it's an extremely interesting topic. I've even heard that there's a little bit of a resurgence. I heard about a group of Karaites, they're called, in California. A girl in my class, my student, said that somebody in her base Chabad, she was from California, was telling her that they've become part of the Karaite. The problem with this is, and it's really one sentence that you have to say to them, they say, "We don't need oral law. We'll just keep the written law. We don't need the rabbis and what they added later." What we're saying is we didn't add it. We told it parent to child, teacher to student, 1,000 years, and then it was written down during the time of the Romans after the destruction of the Second Temple. The main sentence you have to say, and this is what I will just finish with this, is that you need to know Torah to know that that's impossible to do. You cannot keep Torah without oral law, without Torah Sheba'al Peh. Why? Because there's so much that doesn't say. It says, "Uchsaftem al mezuzos beisecha v'isharecha." You should write them and place them on your doorposts. Place what? Write what? Where on the doorpost? So Torah Sheba'al Peh, oral law, tells you 4 parshas, Shema, etc. Then you have 4 parshas is tefillin. Sorry. Then what part of the door? Actually, you're supposed to divide your door in thirds, and it's on the top, the middle third, on the top of the middle third. Okay. So it says, "Ukshartem liyos al yadecha." No, yes. "Ukshartem liyos al yadecha," and that we know means tefillin. No, vayula toitafais beineinecha, right? So what are toitafais? Do you know that that word toitafais doesn't say anywhere else in Torah? So what is it a potato? What is a toitafais? So we learned from Torah Sheba'al Peh, from the oral law, that it's a box and it has to be square and it has to be black and it has to have 4 chapters, Shema, V'haya, Kadesh Likol Bechar, and V'haya Kiviyacha, and you have to wrap it. Vayula taitafais beineinecha. Does that mean here, here, here? Actually, it's here. So when you say, someone who doesn't know, it sounds so beautiful. We just keep the written law. But the truth is can't, because you wouldn't know what to do. So basically, it's not that it can be kept without interpretation. So if you reject the rabbi's interpretation, you're making your own interpretation, right? So it's not like, oh, we don't need any interpretation. We just do the authentic, written law. You can't keep it. Do you know that it says in the Torah to slaughter animals? Nowhere in the Torah tells you any of the rules about where and how. So it has to be a Torah Sheba'al Peh, oral law. God wouldn't tell us to do something and then not give us the instructions what to do. So that was the problem. And she's right, whoever asked that question. Very often things that were written for the Jews weren't just written for the Jews, but for themselves, but as a way to defend themselves against the Karaites. It was a very hard time. The Rambam met Karaite Jews in Egypt and really waged a war against them, and of course a peaceful war. There's a story that the Rambam met a group of women, Karaite women, and he started to teach them. And he told them that, do you go to mikveh? Yes. But they knew nothing that it has to be 40 sa, it has to be rainwater, of course, bar al gabe bar, etc. And they were just, in the bathtub, right? And he explained to them that they weren't keeping something that they thought they were, because they didn't have oral law. And the Rambam worked very hard on combating the Karaites. Yes. Did that explain it too much? I don't know.
No, it's good. Okay, two more questions that came in. I
Sure.
just don't want to miss anyone. Is there a book that you can recommend where the Rambam spoke about the healing ailments that you mentioned, that people would come and he would advise, and he was only able to answer from the town, but
right. I truthfully don't know. I'm sure there are women, maybe even some women right here now, who can type it into the chat. Not something that I know a lot about.
Okay.
I've heard of the Rambam diet and this or that, but I don't know. I want to tell you that last year there was an exhibition in the Center for Jewish History in Manhattan of Rambam's books, very rare books. There is a collector, I forgot his name, he lives in Chicago, a wealthy man, and had started to learn Moreh Nevuchim, the Rambam's book of philosophy, and then started to purchase many very fascinating books of the Rambam, Kisvei Yad, that means books in the Rambam's manuscript, in his Rambam's handwriting. And so they also got books not only from his collection, but from different museums. There's a Bodleian Museum in Oxford University they gave us the actual drawing of the Rambam of the menorah, like right with the I could show you the picture. I gave it to my students in our booklet that we do. And I took the 10th, 11th, and 12th grade there last year, and it was fantastic. It was only there for a couple of months, and I took them in the beginning of the year, 3 classes at a time, and they got to see very rare manuscripts. I'm trying to remember, the picture that I mean is this one, obviously. This is the picture that we don't know if it's really the Rambam. I'm trying to remember if there was any of his medical books that in that exhibition. I don't remember. I can't remember.
It's amazing that you take your students. It's like so hands-on, and I'm sure
Yes.
it was so meaningful to them because they learned about this great sage,
Right, and now
Tzaddik,
they're seeing
and now
it.
they're seeing like his
Absolutely,
teachings. Incredible.
absolutely. Everyone
Where
loves a
can
field
it,
trip. Go ahead.
yeah, where can one find the letter the Rambam wrote to his translator that you
Yes.
shared?
Well, even if you just Google the Rambam's, or just get, the Rambam's daily schedule. I just took it probably also off Google, and the top of it says the Rambam's, let me see, the Rambam's daily schedule. I probably just Googled it, I think. Yeah. You can find it. Yeah,
Okay.
you'll be able to find it. Yes.
Okay, one more comment came in. I just want to share it.
Sure.
Okay, just give me a second while I pull it up.
Sure.
And then just we're gonna end off. We spoke about this with you sharing a Rebbe story, a personal family Rebbe story. We'd love to hear from you to make it more like connection. Like we love connecting, and we always love hearing Rebbe stories. Okay, the Jews from Mashhad. Tell me if I'm pronouncing it correct.
I don't know who that
180
is.
years were forced to convert to Islam, but kept all the mitzvos in secret in Mashhadi.
Is that Yemen? I don't know. What is Mashhadi?
Okay,
Let me
so
look.
whoever asked that,
Let me
whoever
look.
commented it,
I could be, I don't,
It's me, Marshall, it's from Iran. This is Sarah Carmeli. I'm
Oh,
from
hi, sir.
Iran.
it was
Hi.
Sarah Carmeli
It-
that wrote it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So
It's
the
town
Jews
in
of,
Iran. 180
okay.
years ago, there was a pogrom, and they were told to convert, otherwise they're going to be killed.
When
it's
was
handed
this?
down-
When was this?
180 years ago, there was a pogrom.
Wow,
They
okay.
called it Allah Dadi, and they were told to convert. So basically, the Chachamim, 40 Jews got killed, and the Chachamim decided they're going to follow Rambam and just pretend to convert. And it's handed down through the ages. Till now, we still have this wonderful Mashdi community in Great Neck, and they're very proud to say they're kept together and united and following the Rambam. He said, if you convert, but you're keeping everything in secret.
I think you have to just be careful. That's fascinating. Before you said, where the Rambam said they should convert, the Rambam never said.
No. He said,
Right.
no, he
That
didn't say
if
to
you
convert. He said,
converted, right.
he said you couldn't keep all the mitzvahs. In other words,
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah, they were
And that-
keeping, they kept everything strict like the Hasidim. They were basically got underground mikvah, and they had a
Worded like
Jesus.
this.
underground bakery.
Wow, the Mesiras Nefesh.
Yeah,
It's
Mama,
very
really.
important to teach our girls that the incredible Mesiras Nefesh of the Yidden. And thank you for sharing that. That's
Thank you.
very interesting. Thank you.
Thank you so much, X.
Yeah, there's so much history. So
So much.
yes.
Well, we're gonna have to do a part 2 one day because there's so much to share. The Rambam is buried in Teferia.
Yes. When you go to Tveria, you will see, first of all, this is a saying that anybody who's going to speak about the Rambam will start with Mimoshe ad Moshe Lokam Kimoshe, right? From Moshe Rabbeinu, who gave us Torah Shebechsav, and Rambam, Moshe ben Maimon, who gave us Torah, oral law. There was nobody like Moshe. When you walk up, I'm sure many of you have been, there will be 7 columns on your right and 7 columns on your left, and those will be the 14 sections of the Mishnah Torah of the Rambam. I think a student told me today I didn't remember this. It's been a couple of years since I've been in Eretz Yisrael. That the Yud Gimel Ikrei Emunah, the 13 Imamins, are written also near the Rambam's kever. So the Rambam, yes, is buried in Tveria. There are other great Tanaim and Amoraim much earlier than the Rambam buried there. The Arizal, who was a 15th century Mekubal, of course, he, not 15th century, 1500, 16th century, he walked around northern Eretz Israel and said, this person is buried here. He was able to, with Kabbalah, know who is buried, and so many of the Kfarim. When you go to Tveria, Rabbi Akiva is up the hill. Rachel, Rabbi Akiva's wife, is buried somewhere else. Reb Meir Balanes, who was a Tana from between 68 and 200, is another place you can visit. And there's a big Beis HaChaim, a Lubavitcher, Chabad Beis HaChaim. My grandparents are buried in Tveria. And near where that is, you have the students of the Maggid that came to Eretz Yisrael, the Maggid of Mezrich, and they're also all buried there in Tveria.
Wow. I just want to say this tzedakah box, the reason why I use it is because it's connected to Kol Chabad, which is connected to
Yes,
Meir Bal Hanes. And
absolutely.
it's big merits, and tzedakah is protection. So every single coin that goes into this goes to the Meir Bal Hanes.
And the Rebbe always talks about giving tzedakah before benching licht. But recently I saw where the Rebbe said to give tzedakah in a tzedakah of Reb Meir Bal Hanes specifically.
Yes, I've heard that
So
before.
so that is a good pushka to have.
So I just want to say, like, okay, so we heard this amazing class. We heard all this history, a lot of things we didn't know. And now it's opening up our, appetite to try to get more information, like where to get more reading material and where to find out more about, even his job. It's very interesting because, like, we all want to be healthy and heal. And
Right.
the Rambam,
Was it?
the tzaddik that he was and is, because he's still living on through his teachings, we should really tap into it. So the Rebbe was very into learning 3 prakim every single day of the Rambam, and the lower level. I mean, it's a level, but the
Yeah.
level of learning
What?
one. I just want to say that I grew up watching my father learning 3 prakim of Tanya every single day.
Yeah.
He's a master in the Rambam, and it's something that I'm very proud of. It's like the Rambam books in Hebrew, and he really and the more you learn, like my grandmother would say, like not knowledge is power. When you have
Absolutely.
knowledge, it's power that you have. So Chabad.org is a great place to start. Rabbi Gordon, who I'm a huge fan of, he's no longer in this world, but he's very much alive spiritually. And like, I feel like I hear him every single day. I listen to his Tanya every day and his Chumash every day. But the Rambam I could do a little better with, because your life gets busy. But there's
Yeah.
daily Rambam that I'll recommend that everyone should consider to listen to. It's our like inheritance that the Rambam left us. He worked so hard all his life, sweat, blood, and tears, literally, running away, like you said. I don't know how that would feel. We're very blessed how we live today. Our grandparents were not as blessed. Some of our parents were not as blessed. However, we need to tap into the gifts that Hashem gave us, and all the answers are in the Torah. And it's very easy to open up the news and listen. Right now they're making a deal like for the hostages, and people are excited. But what does the Torah actually say about it? So today on all the broadcasts, I sent out a Rebbe video, and if anybody wants to see it, I will post it in the chat right now on exactly what the Torah says about the hostage deal and what you should do and what you shouldn't do. And it's really important. And I believe that the Rambam touches on all these topics, and it's fascinating. And we should tap into it because right now we really need it. And it's like living with the times. It's
Absolutely.
unreal what's happening in the world right now. And we really need to reframe our minds and not get afraid that we have to bow down to this one or bow down to that one, because he said that we need to do this deal. We don't need to do this deal because we need all the hostages to come home, not 30. We need every single one to come home. And when we do a deal, we limit for all the other ones. And the Torah has all the MS, all the truth. And my heart, I don't know, everyone that listens to me every single week, we say Tehillim for the hostages since October 7th. We give tzedakah, we pray, we learn together. And if anyone wants it more, we need it and we need to demand it. And like, today I told someone we need Mashiach, and because everyone's like, "How are you?" I'm like, "I'm okay. We just really need Mashiach." And she's like, "I don't see him coming very soon." And it made me very sad that they said that, but we have to believe because we are believers. And when we believe it, it comes true, we manifest it, and we have to make it happen. So if we say we don't believe it, we're kind of making a blockage on it actually happening. So our words have a lot of power. So yes, we have to work on, and I'm sure the Rambam spoke a lot about the concept of Mashiach, but we have to work on bringing Mashiach, learning about Mashiach, because Mashiach is literally at our out at the door fronts, and it says before Mashiach comes, we're going to suffer a lot, and we're suffering a lot. All of us. There's not one person that's not suffering right now. It could be in your personal lives, it could be for health, it could be for whatever it is. Every single person I know is suffering in some kind of way right now, and especially the hostages. And many of us don't know the hostages, but we know them because they're our core. We're all brothers and sisters, and we make up a puzzle. And when one puzzle piece is missing, we cannot be complete. So we need to complete that puzzle. So let's tap into Rambam, all of us together. When I say let's, I'm talking to myself as well. And I'm going to please God. I'm going to say this publicly. So now I have to really, by next year, I should have so much more wisdom up my sleeve. And people say, like, how do you know all that stuff? And honestly, some people are born with like really gifted. It sharpens your mind, all the learning. And I don't know how I have this information, but if you ask me, do I know a lot? I'm going to say no. But the fact is that we know more than we think. And I was just having a conversation with my friend. It's really, really, really important to tap into our gifts that Hashem gave us. And learning Torah, it's literally gold for us. Like
Absolutely.
my grandmother said, books are your best friend. And it's true. They are our best friends, and we should tap into these holy books. Now, Mrs. Lerman, we're going to conclude with a Rebbe story from you, and then after I'm going to shut the screen, and I have a fascinating story to tell you after about a follow-up for next class. So if you want to
Okay.
stay on, you can.
Okay. After I got married in 1983, Tafshin Mem Dalet. So I got married the day after Yom Kippur. I have a little while. My husband went to Kel a year or two later. We were looking into different shlichus. When we decided on a place that we were going to go, we wrote into the Rebbe, and we didn't get an answer. So we waited a while, and we decided to write in again, and we wrote in the details of the place, and that we would like to go, and asking the Rebbe for a haskama and a bracha. And we also didn't get an answer. So my husband was speaking with his mashpia, and his mashpia told him that maybe you should write all the details of the situation. So we wrote that my husband's in Kel, and I'm teaching in Beis Rivka. It was like 3 years after we were married, and that we'd like to go on shlichus, but my husband's parents and my parents wanted my husband to go into business with my father, into my father's business, and that I'm in.
What did your father do?
He was a jeweler, and so he had different departments, and he wanted my husband to take over one of the departments, the precious stones, and that I was teaching in Beis Rivka, but we want to go on shlichus. We got an answer immediately, and the Rebbe underlined that where it said to go into business with my father, and underlined about me, about teaching in Beis Rivka. It was a huge shock to us. We thought for sure we were going on shlichus, and it was difficult. It was a difficult thing for us. Every once in a while I'd say, maybe we could write again. And my husband said, no, we wrote, we got a clear answer, and we're staying here in Crown Heights. And Baruch Hashem, we've seen the brachas of where we are, and the brachas of the Rebbe, and that's one of the stories that I have with the Rebbe. I also want to just say that I got married the day after Yom Kippur, and our first Sheva brachas was, I got married on Sunday, was Monday, and the Rebbe said something that the Rebbe had not done for a very long time, that he wanted to make, the Rebbe said that the Rebbe would make, there was a Farbrengen that night, and the Rebbe said that he wanted to have Sheva brachas at the Farbrengen. So there is a video that you can see where my grandfather, I was there upstairs by the women, my husband downstairs, and the Rebbe, my grandfather makes all the 7 brachas, and we have Eid Shama and Sheva brachas, and I consider that obviously a huge schus for me and for my husband.
That's an incredible merit. Could you just tell us your grandfather's name?
My grandfather's name was Reb Yehuda Chitrik. Yeah, it was my father's father. My grandfather lived to be 106 years old. His Yartzeit is Yud Zayin. So today is Tes Zayin, so his Yartzeit is in 2 days.
Wow, so what's his full name? We're gonna
His
dedicate
name,
this.
Yehuda Chitrik. Yeah.
And I know, like, his name for like Yehuda Ben.
Ben Tzvi Hirsch Chitrik.
Okay,
If
so
you're-
my
yeah.
father was a friend of your father's, your grandfather's.
My father,
Sorry,
your
your
father,
father's.
my father, yeah.
Yeah, they knew each other, so I
Father
always grew
Zelenge.
up hearing stories.
Stories, okay.
So we're gonna need a part 2 with all
Okay.
your incredible
Okay.
stories. If we'll talk about it after.
We'll talk another
But
time. I'm sure everyone's has lots to do on a Thursday night, but I want to hear what you're
We
going to say.
enjoyed your show very much, Mr. Lerman. Very
Thank you.
inspiring.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so
Thank
much.
you. You're welcome.
Thank you
Thank you.
so much. I
Thank you.
really
Oops.
I really appreciate you being here tonight and sharing your wisdom with us. You know, it's a gift to have
It was
wisdom,
a
but
plus for me.
well,
Thank
it's a
you.
merit because it's gonna go out to the whole world. And please God, in this class honor, we're gonna start learning the Rambam. Last week we committed to start learning Tanya, and
Wow.
this week we're gonna start
If you
learning.
start with you could learn Sefer Mitzvahs. It's not very long, not hard. And you feel great after a whole year, like you said, like, wow. You can even learn the Yehadis books, from the Chidon, from Tzvos Hashem. That's the Sefer Mitzvahs, right? Going through the mitzvahs, and you feel terrific when you're done, like so much knowledge. And I know the whole Torah. I mean, not really, but I know the 613 mitzvahs. It's a very good feeling.
Chabad.org. Chabad.org.
Yes, absolutely. You can get it in English and in Hebrew, English and Hebrew. There are so many ways that you can get it. It's fantastic. And
Okay.
it really feels great. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Lerman. This was a treat, and looking forward to continuing in the
Thank
future.
you.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Okay, so we're going to conclude with a Karsataiv and saying thank you. I want to thank Hashem for this incredible opportunity that I'm given to manifest and bring out light into the world. I want to say thank you to the Rebbe for being my partner in this class and really helping me with all the ideas that come to my head. I want to say thank you to all the ambassadors of this class. An ambassador is someone that shares the classes. And in 1 minute, poof, so much light goes out into the world. If you'd like to become an ambassador today, please reach out to me. I will share my merits. I want to say thank you to my mashpia, my spiritual mentor of this class, Shandy Jacobson, for really just being like my rock behind the scenes and really guiding me. So thank you so much for all your incredible wisdom and love. And lastly, I want to say thank you to my dear husband for really helping me with the class. This is not really his, I wouldn't say this is my passion. I don't know if it's his passion, but he helps me with my passion. So I'm very grateful. And he puts it onto the YouTube channel. And I want to say thank you to everyone that tunes in weekly. Like, everyone keeps coming back and keep coming back. And We'd love feedback, so please share it, and we'll see you next week.